Well, welcome to the 700 Club. The president said he received a warm letter from Kim Jong-un of North Korea. The Koreans said, no, it didn't happen. And now news is coming out that North Korean defectors who live in South Korea are saying that Kim Jong-un, who is terribly overweight, has had a, quote, cardiovascular event. We don't know what that means. Does that mean bypass surgery? Does it mean, triple bypass? Does it mean a stent? We don't know what it was. But it does mean that this man, who you can see right there, the picture is terribly overweight, is in the hospital with what they call a cardiovascular event. And does this mean that his sister takes over? Does it mean that the army will take over? Does it mean that that terrible dictatorship that started with Kim Il-sung, his grandfather, is coming to an end? We don't know. But one thing for sure is North Korea is, as one congressman said so aptly, it's a crime family in charge of a country, and it is a crime family. It's one of the most repressive regimes in the world, and they have nuclear weapons and they have rockets. So just keep that in mind. Well, at long last, Israel finally has a government. After 3 elections and more than a year of political bickering, last night, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and former General Benny Gantz agreed to form a unity government. Well, what did COVID-19 have to do with the final breakthrough? CBN Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell has that story.
Just before the opening ceremony for Holocaust Remembrance Day, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and blue and white leader Benny Gantz signed an agreement on a national unity government. The move prevents Israelis from going to an unprecedented 4th round of elections. Netanyahu and Gantz each tweeted their response. Netanyahu said, "I promise the State of Israel a national emergency government that will work to save the lives and livelihoods of the citizens of Israel." Gantz said, "We prevented a 4th election. We will protect democracy. We will battle corona, and we will worry about all the citizens of Israel. We have an emergency unity government." The deal leaves Netanyahu in office for the next 18 months as prime minister, with Gantz as the deputy prime minister. Then they swap positions in October 2021. The COVID-19 pandemic and its fallout are credited with pushing the leaders into an agreement. Gantz's campaign focused on getting rid of Netanyahu, who has been indicted on charges of fraud and breach of trust. About 2,000 Israelis protested earlier against the unity government, but most just breathed a sigh of relief.
I think people have been waiting for the leaders of both the Likud and blue and white to put this unity government together. This is the kind of situation where you don't want to have a political battle. You don't want to have disagreements about what should have been done or what shouldn't have been done. You want the country to pull together.
The deal puts Israel back on track to implement President Trump's peace plan and apply sovereignty in biblical Judea and Samaria when maps are finalized in July. Former Israeli ambassador to the UN, Dori Gold, told CBN News that for now, the main thing is dealing with corona.
What we need to do is get this resolved. I'm talking about the medical side. And then we'll go back to the diplomacy, where I think Israel has historical rights and an urgency in light of what's going on with Iran and the countries of the region to make sure that we have defensible borders.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Well, for those of us who love Israel, we're delighted at this. These 2 good men, Netanyahu and Gantz, are both good men, and they're going to work together, which is what we've been hoping and praying for. It's good news. Well, can you imagine if you're an oil producer and you produce 1,000 barrels of that precious oil that used to, it was the engine of growth during World War II. The tanks ran on oil, the planes ran on oil. They had the Ploesti oil fields in Romania that they had to bomb because the Nazis had them. And whoever controlled the oil was essentially going to be the winner. We even have an instance where the tanks of Patton were held up so that oil could go to Montgomery. and there wasn't enough oil. Oil was so important. Now, the oil went from 65 to 70 cents to 90 cents a barrel. Now it's about $36 negative, $37.63. So if somebody produces 1,000 barrels of oil and he wants to give it to sell it to somebody, the seller with the tank is going to be paid $37,000 to take the oil. It's unbelievable. And this COVID-19 lockdown is wrecking the oil industry because people are driving, planes aren't flying, and the machinery that has propelled our industry to the greatest in the world isn't moving. So people aren't taking the oil. This is a very serious matter that we should consider. Are we going into a recession, in an actual depression? John Jessup has that.
Well, Pat, as you were just saying, with everyone staying home, travel is taking a big hit, leaving too much oil in the market, driving down prices. It's not just oil, though. Businesses across America are being crushed by the national economic shutdown. But could going back to business as usual too soon put lives at stake? Dale Hurd reports.
Is it time to reopen America for business, at least on a state-by-state basis? A growing number of governors say yes.
Plans are now in place in Georgia, Tennessee, South Carolina, and Texas to gradually open their states' economies after indications the coronavirus outbreak is slowing. Georgia Governor Brian Kemp says gyms, barbershops, and bowling alleys can reopen Friday, and some restaurants and theaters with social distancing. South Carolina is set to allow most retail stores to reopen, but only at 20% capacity.
Just really glad we can have people in the store again.
Tennessee is set to reopen most businesses May 1st. Industry giants Boeing and Bobcat are also sending people back to work. And protests continue with demands that more states open back up. In Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, thousands protested the state's stay-at-home orders.
We're not subjects, we're citizens, we're free people.
In Phoenix, protesters faced off with people dressed in scrubs, as hundreds say they want their economy reopened. Dr. Anthony Fauci warns it could backfire.
What you do if you jump the gun and go into a situation where you have a big spike, you're going to set yourself back.
But 22 million Americans are out of work. Republicans and Democrats have reportedly agreed on the principles of a new aid bill. Small businesses are still waiting for that extra help. The lack of demand for oil caused the May contract price to collapse Monday into negative territory for the first time in history. But President Trump did not seem concerned.
Much of it has to do with short sellers. Much of it has to do, if you look a month into the future, I think it's at $25 or $28 a barrel.
Meanwhile, the virus has closed meatpacking plants in a half-dozen states, sparking fears of shortages.
While some parts of the country are opening up, the president is tightening up the borders. Overnight, he tweeted that he will be signing an executive order temporarily suspending immigration into the U.S. because of coronavirus. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Thanks, Dale. Pat, back to you.
Just think what's happening in the farm economy, ladies and gentlemen. The farmers have to plant corn, wheat, oats, these various crops. But if there is no demand for those crops, then what are they going to do with them? There's no more storage capacity. What are they going to do with them? Well, they just plow the crops under. And that means that the next year they won't be planting as much. So with restaurants closed, there's not a demand for spaghetti, for macaroni, for crackers, for rolls, for all the things we eat. You're not selling as many loaves of bread. There's not a demand for the wheat, the oats, the other grains. So the farmers plant less. So it's not just something that'll happen this year. It's something that's going to happen year after year after year. There'll become shortages. So instead of a robust economy that's able to feed everybody and give surpluses to the world, we will be short. And then there will come a possible famine. And it's amazing, you see long lines right now, lines sometime in the miles for people who just want a little bit of food, because they're with all these surpluses that are being plowed under we still can't, because of the supply chain, we can't get the stuff out to the people to keep them from going hungry. So we have so many people that are going hungry, and I know our Operation Blessing and other organizations I'm familiar with are out doing their best to feed people because there isn't enough food. And yet we have food that's being plowed under because there's no demand. We had the most efficient economy in the world. There's nothing to even compare with America. And then suddenly, because of this bug, we have shut the taps off and have turned our economy into a wasteland. And it's not just oil, it's not just grain, it's just all of these produce, the production of our cars and our automobiles, our motorcycles, our tractors, everything. And also the airplanes. We're not producing because there's no demand. It's a terrible situation, but if there's ever anything you ought to pray about, that is it, because we don't want to go into a serious recession where everybody's out of work and the government is straining just to meet its bills. John?
Pat, well, speaking of farmers and the food supply, COVID-19 is spoiling the meat processing industry. At least half a dozen meatpacking plants are closed nationwide, and hundreds of their workers tested positive with the virus. That's contributing to a growing concern about our nation's food supply. CBN's Caitlin Burke looked into how both farmers and consumers are creatively keeping their kitchens stocked.
Across the country, major meat processing facilities have been forced to close their doors due to COVID-19 outbreaks. Bad news for the farmers who depend on them to get their meat to market, and for consumers who expect to find their grocery store shelves stocked.
When you disrupt the front of the supply chain, it ultimately disrupts the back end of the supply chain.
And we're seeing that as massive processing facilities close their doors after COVID-19 outbreaks. The impact expected to soon hit consumers.
I think this can be as soon as next couple of weeks. We can see the shortages, especially in the pork categories.
As millions of consumers find empty store shelves, farmers and other suppliers are being forced to throw out food normally sent to schools and restaurants.
Worked so hard, and then all of a sudden it's flushed down the drain.
While the Agriculture Department works to help farmers distribute food directly to the public, shoppers are getting creative.
I couldn't find avocados at the grocery store this week, but they were available through Panera Grocery.
Restaurants are now selling items that they can't serve to diners. Many hope that by offering staples like fresh milk and produce, customers will also add other menu items to their orders.
Farmers who serve their local communities say business is booming, but they've had to get creative when it comes to figuring out how to get their products into the hands of their customers.
John Morisani of Laurel Ridge Farm in Litchfield, Connecticut, began selling his beef and pork at his farm stand when COVID-19 restrictions shut down the local farmers market.
We've had farmers markets where you've had 3 sales for a 4-hour market. In here, we've been actually very busy the entire time that this has been going on. Definitely, and I've gotten a number of orders for quarter cows, half cows, and that kind of stuff. I'm basically, our bulk stuff, we're sold out through June.
Some other Connecticut farmers teamed up to launch a virtual farmers market.
Instead of stopping at our farm or at our table at a farmer's market, they stop at our webpage, order what they want from our farm, and then there's a link on my webpage to go order from the next farm, and they'll go about, they pay one delivery fee for, getting whatever they want from 4 to 5 farms. And it's a win-win for everybody, I think.
It was supposed to be a one-weekend thing to replace the annual Easter farmers market, but demand was so high, they've decided to keep it going. Farms like Mapleview and Laurel Ridge use local meat processors rather than major plants. So far, there have been no disruptions, allowing these farmers to work to meet the community demand. They hope the quality of their product keeps customers coming back long after the pandemic eases.
Wherever somebody's watching this, I'm sure you have a local farmer somewhere in your backyard that you might not know about right now, that you can just go see how are they preserving land, how are they tending to their land, how are they treating their animals, and these things are just so much more transparent when you're buying directly from the farmer than when you're buying, meat from a grocery store.
Caitlin Burke, CBN News, Northern Connecticut.
Thanks, Caitlin. Pat, some creative solutions coming out of this pandemic.
Well, thank goodness. We're a creative people, and if the government just leaves us alone, together we can make it, but it's not fun.